just I don't know. Anyway,
Well,
let me do this again. Take two. Wait, what does that do?
making of CRM Playaz.
I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
And come on, if you don't know it's the CRM Playaz by now, what good are you?
Why are you even listening? Go away.
I don't know.
We're the
Yeah,
only
well,
show in the world that's trying to discourage people from coming here.
yeah, don't watch us.
Jeff, do us a
Please.
favor. Go do something else, please.
But if you insist on sticking around, we are the CRM Playaz. It's Thursday afternoon. It's pretty nice in Atlanta right now.
Yeah, here too. Here too. It's a little hot, but summer.
You know, I feel like we're tap dancing because we're waiting on something to happen so that we could really, really start the show the way it has been starting for the last several months. But something's a missing right here. Something's awry,
Or it's a bourbon.
or it's a Sven. I don't know. We don't see Sven. I hope everything's all right. Jeez,
Sven, we weren't talking about you when we said go away. Maybe we wanted you to stay. Come back. Where are you?
Well, yeah. Well, in the meantime, if anybody knows where Sven Esser is, let us know. Tell him that he's late. He's supposed to be here.
We are counting.
He's supposed to help us. That's right. Anyway, we'll go on. We'll soldier on because we do have a really cool show ahead.
Yeah, we do. Although we can do what we normally do is never tell anyone who the guest is, and if they don't know by now, they won't know till 3:15.
Yeah, you can guess who the guest is until 3:15.
Yeah, but you will not win anything because all you had to do is look, and you would have seen it.
I know. Yeah, that's like the worst kept secret, really. Who's coming up on the show? Anyway, I want to ask you about something, and then I do want to kind of touch on some of the tidbits I looked through and found interesting in the transcript from Salesforce's earning report. Which, by the way, they blew it out again. Well, we can talk about. Wait a minute. I see a sighting.
Whew.
What the hell? Who died?
Bonus dies. That means people are just getting paid their base salary from here on. Bonus dies. So what is bonus? That must be it's sort of derivative of Spanish. So maybe it's Portuguese. It's not with that. By the way, I'm not trying to insult people from Portugal by calling you a derivative of Spanish. I know you're not. Okay, you're a separate language, but there's relationships. There's romance, language, Latin root kind of things. Bonus.
Good day in Latin.
Okay. It's Latin. See that I'm saying Latin roots, and then turns out it is actually Latin. Wow, Sven, you're getting intellectual, romantic, and ancient.
All that. Yeah.
Ancient.
He says that their LinkedIn isn't working. All right, LinkedIn, get your act together because we need you to work. Although it says it's working.
He's on Twitter. Yeah, he's coming in from Twitter.
That's exactly. So he had to go to a different channel. We appreciate the effort, man.
That means it's possible we're not broadcasting to LinkedIn.
It's possible. I haven't seen anything. I didn't get a notification. Oh, yeah, I did get a notification saying Brent Leary is live. So,
okay.
I don't know.
Hopefully.
We'll see. Somebody, if you're watching us on LinkedIn, send a comment in, let us know. Or if you're not, do like Sven and jump to another channel and say, hey, LinkedIn is still not working.
LinkedIn says waiting to start with a picture.
What picture? I'm more interested. Probably what picture is showing?
Probably the two of us that we show at the end.
Is it the one that we end the show with?
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, maybe LinkedIn is having issues.
It's too bad.
I see YouTube is saying we're live, and I did get a notification, but hopefully it'll catch up. Hopefully it'll open up because we can't slow down for LinkedIn. We got to
keep us posted, Sven.
Yes, please, Sven. That's another task for you beyond opening the show with a language of your choice, greeting and things like that. All right. I want to ask you about something that came up on the happier hour yesterday. Could you explain to the people what a bang cookie is?
Okay, so there's actually I'll give it more significance than it truly deserves. Um, Ultimately, a bang cookie is a big, thick cookie made out of organic ingredients with organic cane sugar and organic chocolate and organic other stuff. Oh, LinkedIn's
All
up.
right. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Uh, Now, what made it interesting was I went and bought 12 of them, ultimately for varying reasons. Esteban Kolsky, who many of you know, and we all definitely know, was actually coming here for a visit. And I bought a bunch of these cookies so we could sit there and munch on them while we were sitting and yakking. But as it turns out, it was because on my end, we had to delay it for a few weeks. So basically, I had a lot of these bang cookies. Now, the reason it was interesting was where I found them. I actually bought them in effect off of TikTok, right? And I was watching TikTok videos, and as I am doing often, and I ran across an ad for Bang cookies, and boy, they look good. They were big, and they were these chewy types of things, and they had this kind of melty, chocolatey thing going on, and they made it as as gooey as you can make a cookie without like literally like drenching you in them in the ad. So I thought, you know what? They look amazing. I'll go order some. Interestingly enough, however, you can tell a company that is, let's say, on the one hand, gearing to an audience that is clearly not me, uh, or let's say not in age at least, is much younger. And two is adolescent in their worldview. And three is not totally well versed in marketing yet. As a result of ordering them, I got a 10% discount. I started getting text messages every, I don't know, 5 seconds. That's what it felt like anyway. I get number of text messages every day. Why don't you order more cookies? I hadn't even gotten them yet. I actually had, this was an actual 2-message sequence at one point. This is how they work. We shipped your cookies. That was Monday, Tuesday. Well, you probably loved your cookies. They were delicious, weren't they? Here's another 10% off on your next order. This is literally the next day, and it was clearly at best 2-day delivery. They can't even do the math, right? So, and the whole thing, of course, was just think of when you're 13 and you hear the word bang, what you would think of. Okay, that's literally their marketing and advertising. So,
Well,
you
there's
know
the
what I'm
Big
saying?
Bang
Right. Well, it wasn't
theory.
that. Really was not that. Right. So, I mean, it's what you wanted when you were 13 to do. Right. So, right.
Well, I'm
So,
leaving that one alone.
is what it is. Right. Hormones are hormones. Right. So, but that's their advertising. And it really doesn't work unless you're 13. Then it may work. But I'm not. Right. So, I would put it to you this way. Now, that said, I had my first cookie last night. It was a s'mores one. And honestly, I was a little disappointed. It was good, but not great. So I will keep you guys all posted on the next cookie and let you know how good it is later. But there's a lot of elements that went into that thing, but that's what a bang cookie is. Should you buy it now? Let me eat a couple more and I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna reserve my judgment and actually depend on your judgment on that. You know,
Fair
you
enough.
can check that
I'm
out.
willing to make
But
those judgments. I'm tough.
you know that repetitive text that it just reminds me of this conversation I had with the cold one, the bold one, John Cold Rice Lawson
The
around
old one.
the 1% conversion. So you do this what I call this ridiculous marketing that pisses off 99% of the people and maybe converts 1% of the people, and marketers seem to be like cool with that. I'm going to play this clip because it caused another conversation with our buddy Anand Tucker, who kind of explained it a little bit more. But here's my first reaction to that kind of marketing that they did with you. Here we are. are most of these companies, they're just basically still running off of the old like the foundational aspects of selling on the web, e-commerce, cookies, and using the ridiculous stuff like retargeting and just basically stalking you wherever you go on the web, just because you just so happen to go to this website. Now, the next 10 websites you go to, do you really need to get an ad from the first one? That's what we're all there's all.
It works.
Does it work?
Look,
Do you know if
people
it
won't
works?
put
Do you
money
really
into
know?
retargeting if it doesn't work. Because a lot of people will shop online at work, or during the day, and totally forget that they put stuff in the cart, and they need to be reminded. So let's do it.
But how do we know if it really works? What if this is the only thing
we
you've
know
done
it works
and
because we know it works
compared to what?
But I'm saying we know it works because people put money in it. If it didn't work,
what though? What
do you mean compared to what? That was the best thing out.
Have they tried anything else?
What else are you going to try right now?
Well, they're going to have to figure out something, because these cookies are going away in a couple of years. All right, man. There's a lot of just tying the cookies and
that was funny.
Repetitive, ridiculous marketing tactics.
That sounded like our show last week. Oh,
it was based on our show last week. It carried over to watching Amazon last week. Then it carried over yesterday with Anand, and then it circled back around here because Bang Cookies just made me remember that thing.
It makes sense, though. I mean, the reality is, like everything else that we have to think through nowadays, we have to rethink through how marketing's done. I'll tell you something related to that. Like several years ago, I was at Thunderhead advisory session, and we were just chatting, and Phil Venville, who's the resident intellect, and he's brilliant guy. I mean, just brilliant. He's actually the guy who built their Engage framework, and he's got something coming, which is sort of mind blowing, which you'll see in a few months, a couple of months, I think. He was saying, look, we got to move marketers away from campaigns to conversations. He said that's kind of where the future is. And at the time, this is like 7 years ago, right? Marketers weren't ready for that, but then they weren't. I mean, they really weren't. And, you can't just say, marketer, change everything you've ever done. And we don't care what it is freaks you out, just change it. It's not going to happen. Right. Mm-hmm. So, but if you actually follow that idea and you kind of evolve yourself to now and look at it, they're getting ready for it now. They're all of a sudden realizing that marketing is no longer a matter of throw out these things, these campaigns that hit a particular, segment of the world, but that you have to start having conversations, or at least what feel to be conversations with individuals. And that's not, but at scale, right? So I think, it means rethinking how marketing is done. And some of these things, like what Bang Cookies does with texting, that's kind of their way of doing it. It's just adolescent. It's an adolescent way of doing it. But I get, oddly, I get where they're coming from, and I don't totally hold it against them, even though I think it's terrible. But I don't hold it against them because, look, think about where I found them. TikTok, right? And they're following through with something that's been around a lot longer, texting and messaging, and SMS, and they're doing what you do to have something of a conversation, but it's not a real conversation. It's a bot releasing a pill basically every few hours that blooms into opens into 10% off, right? So but it's an attempt to converse, and I get it. I give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I'm assuming they're at least thinking somewhat like that, and it's why things like texting as marketing is not dead, and is never going to be dead, regardless of all the pundits of social audio, right? So the thing is that from that standpoint, this discussion, really is important now, and especially now. I mean, it's not what we're going to talk about today, but but nonetheless, it's important, and then thus we will not talk about it.
Yeah, it could be very important when cookies go away. Anyway, few minutes before we get to our guests, I wanted to touch on just briefly. Salesforce announced their earnings yesterday. They were killer. I mean,
Shocker.
just the top line thing is they're big. But I pulled out a couple of nuggets I thought would be interesting to touch on. So apparently, this last quarter was the first time they had a $6 billion quarter. And I think they're on target for like a run rate for for a 12-month period of like 26 billion or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And in the call, I think it was Mark, said that they're on track to be a 50 billion revenue by, I think it's 2025 or 2026 fiscal year. One of those two.
2031.
No, it's 2025.
No, I was kidding.
Something like that. Oh, okay. Okay. And then they broke it down. Sales Cloud 1.5 for the quarter. So that's a $6 billion segment for 12 months. They say that Service Cloud is a $6 billion business, although they didn't say how much.
Wait.
Yeah.
Is that so? That's $6 billion annual. And
no,
that's
Service Cloud
is annual.
Yeah. All right. Sales Cloud is that's 1.5 billion for this last quarter. So
all right,
that's 6 billion.
Service Cloud 6 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And then Marketing and Commerce Cloud or whatever.
Notice how they didn't give you any hard numbers on that. And you gotta. That's the one question mark. It's like we know that by far was the smallest cloud in terms of revenue.
Well, I know this much. When our buddy Bob Stutz went there, they were way under $1 billion, and when he left, they were well over $1 billion. Marketing Cloud, not Commerce Cloud. Marketing Cloud.
Oh, wait a minute. We got people surprised. Jeff Wisher, he started getting a little antsy. Cookies are going away. Not those kind of cookies, Jeff.
Right.
The Bang cookies are here to stay.
Yes, they are. Especially if there's results of their adolescent humor.
No quiz today, Sven.
Jesus Christ, man. This is a difficult crowd. This is a rough crowd. Right.
Yeah. Are we replacing cookies with blueberry? I don't think so, Jeff. Just
blueberry beagles?
Well, them either. Blueberry bagels for managing login. Oh my goodness. We're wow.
We're
we better move on.
Veering right. Yeah, we got.
All right, let me go through. Let's go through here. All right. Couple other things. Tableau, 9 of the 10 biggest deals of the quarter. MuleSoft, same 8. So those acquisitions are paying off. You gotta give them credit for that one. Public sector, 4 of the top 10 deals of the quarter were public sectors.
That's interesting.
Yeah, 7-figure deals on average, including more than 4.5 clouds. So these things are really, it's not just one thing. They're grabbing a whole bunch of people with multiple clouds there. And number of 7-figure deals, including 5 or more clouds, grew by 29%. Those are, I guess that explains why they had the quarter that they had, right? I mean, when you think about it. And
well, then, I mean, there's conversation to be had about every single thing here, but there's one that I'm fascinated by, the fact that public sector is 4 of the top 10. And I'm not totally surprised, but I'm fascinated. Keep in mind, I've been dealing with public sector myself directly for 20 plus years. And I used to do public sector RFPs and all the stuff that you do. Deal with government. The reality is, once you've got a foothold in the public sector, it's hard to break that foothold, right? It's hard to break the chain. So, like, for example, Oracle's had a long-standing foothold in public sector, a really solid one that's not going to ever go away. But it's really hard to like crack in at a large scale, and just really hard. Now, on the one hand, look, you got Kevin Pashik and Casey Coleman kind of jointly handling the day-to-day at public sector. So it's no surprise that they're doing well. But at the same time, I remember when Salesforce and Mark actually announced that, and this is 10 years ago, probably, we're going to have 1,000 people doing public sector at the end of the year, which of course they weren't. And I've sort of publicly said that. And they didn't. But they have steadily been getting into the pores and now have become a staple in place after place, agency after agency. And that is hard. So this is like the other side, though, is it's insanely lucrative. And weirdly enough, the government actually pays on time, right? So it's a really good place to be. And I think this is really, really significant. And, kudos to them to getting there, at that level, because it's just so hard to unseat the incumbents there.
It's just not getting there. They're getting fully entrenched. 5 or more clouds. That's that's getting in there. Yeah. Real quick. One of the things I thought was interesting, we're going to hear about this Slack first customer 360. That's like the phrase that came through loud and clear just by reading the transcripts. You're going to hear a lot about that phrase, and especially at Dreamforce next month. IBM was one of the examples. You know how many employees IBM still has, by the way?
No.
I believe it's 380,000 employees still.
Wow.
Remember when they were all this talk about they were really, cutting down and 380,000, and then they said it's like 50,000. Yeah, they dropped
380,000.
Yeah. And then there's like they have 50,000 partners, and apparently they're all in on using Slack and Salesforce 360, and so they're gonna be featured. But this term, I found when you start hearing these terms repeated over, this is gonna be their big term for foreseeable future. Slack.
I will tell you honestly, I am really curious to see what. I've never loved Slack particularly, never been a big fan of it, but in Salesforce's hands, to me, it's just a technology weapon that they can then do something with and make into something, meaning they have the tools to make this into something really valuable. To me, which is a sort of half well done developers community platform network. Right. And that was it. I didn't love it, but I will tell you, I can just see
in their hands. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
A really big deal too. And in combination with, of course, Salesforce Plus, meaning all of a sudden you're talking about communities, you're talking about networks, which means you're really talking about ecosystems, you're talking about platforms. In other words, they're all in on what you need to succeed wildly, and they're sort of proving that that's how you do it.
Right, but I put Salesforce Plus on the slide because it wasn't mentioned at all in the earnings transfer, which was really interesting. It was definitely focused on Slack. I mean, let me just quickly. So Tableau, MuleSoft, then you got Slack. They didn't mention Salesforce Plus, but that wasn't an acquisition. And then the other thing I'm going to slip to, because I want to get to our guest. Our industry cloud saw 58%. So industry cloud velocity. Yeah. So all these acquisitions are kicking in big time for these guys. You know how sometimes a company buys these big things and then you never hear from them again? That's not the case here. These guys, they're kind of on the Adobe model of acquisition and integrating and seeing actual results from these acquisitions.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I still think MuleSoft if I'm picking, I'm not going to quite give it this mantle yet, but if I'm picking the number one acquisition any company's made in the last 5 years, I might even say decade, MuleSoft let's say this, MuleSoft is a definite contender for that. And I think it's that important, and which is why I'm not at all surprised I'm not surprised at any of the successes. I think you're right.
Yeah, well, it was so long ago. I think maybe the most important acquisition for Salesforce, at least. And I didn't think of it as that at the time. It might have been ExactTarget.
Yeah. It
might have been.
I'm kind of yes and no on that. I think it was important. Don't get me wrong, but I think it was more important for Pardot than it was for ExactTarget.
That's what they got Pardot in the deal.
That's what I mean. I think that was important. Yeah. ExactTarget. Look, I like I liked it, but it was, it was the best email marketing, scalable email marketing thing out there, but it didn't have the full range. That's why I think it took someone like Bob, who's the builder's builder, to really like take it and make what it had to make of it, and then build it out accordingly. And Pardot was the best piece of that, without any question. And
absolutely.
Honestly, if I'm looking at Scott McCorkle's history, I like his current company, which I think has mind-blowing potential, right? Even more than they ever liked Exact Target. So I think it was important, but I'm still giving it to MuleSoft if I'm comparing the two. Radian 6 is one of them. It's one of them, but I'm still going to give it to, as much
I'm
as
going
I
to guess.
Love them.
I'm going to guess that's Bob Fagel.
Oh, I'm positive that's Bob. Right, but and Radian 6, love them.
That was like the first big one. The first acquisition that put Salesforce on the acquisition map.
Yeah, well, they had actually acquired Buddy Media before that. But that was one where wasn't worth much.
But they paid ridiculously amount of money.
630.
600.
I think 638 million.
Well,
to their credit of that's Salesforce's kind of advertising piece is Buddy Media, really, and what came of it, right? So it had long term, it had a lot more benefit than it did at the time of acquisition.
Got to be kidding me! I'm getting a phone call from Walmart at the moment. The hell,
tell them you order from. They want you to do a show called Watching.
Call me tomorrow. Yeah, we'll talk about watching.
They'll do.
All right, one last thing, because we got our guest. Oops, did I? Oh, I wanted to just bring up. So this is the money quote from me from Benioff. So many of our customers are attracted to us because in many cases they're going through an amazing values transformation, not digital transformation. You notice, to me, that's a big difference.
Yeah,
values transformation. I think that values transformation is being driven by the digital transformation. But I love that phrasing. And then he says, in the areas that we pioneer, that's his words, especially in regards to sustainability, because as you know, Salesforce has been a net zero company, but now we're fully renewable. So he's gone beyond the software talk and technology. Value transformation. I thought that was really interesting. And he can say that because when you have the kind of quarter that they have, you can pretty much say anything, but I'm glad to see that he starts talking in much broader terms and valuing success beyond the kind of just the digital technological side, but now talking about transformation from a standpoint of value. I thought that was really interesting when I looked at the transcript.
And you know what? To me, it's the power of Salesforce, period. It's always been that, that they're the best company I've ever seen in my life at externalizing their cultural, and that also that their values and their core values are meaningful. They're not just marketing fluff, right? So the combination of that and being able to externalize that is, I think, the actual power of Salesforce. I mean, from product to product, sometimes they're better than some companies' equivalents. Sometimes they're worse. It's not like they stand out that far above everybody else. They don't. But when it comes to that the cultural externalization and the power of their commitment to their own values, of course they have glitches here and there like anyone else, but the power is just extraordinary in what they do there. Nobody's even close.
Yep. So I just, lots of stuff in there. I think the one thing that you got to kind of keep an eye out on is the marketing, what do they call it? The marketing and commerce stuff. To me, that 28% sounds good, but I don't think it's as good as the other stuffs.
You're right. 28% of 10 is what? 2.8. Right.
Yeah. So I think Adobe is giving a run for their money.
Look, this Salesforce in those areas is not market leading.
Right.
Not market leading. Look, Oracle's giving them a run too.
Yeah. And you can almost say in terms of the total addressable market increasing, marketing and commerce are the two areas that I think are growing the fastest under the traditional CRM. Well, that's not even traditional, under the CRM, the current CRM umbrella. So, I mean, they're already number one in Sales Cloud and Service Cloud from a revenue standpoint. But that marketing and commerce is, I think, the area with the most growth potential.
Yeah,
And
I think if I'm
Adobe and
picking one
Oracle,
of
like
the
you
two,
said, man,
Adobe, Oracle, and a million players who are going to nip at their heels, man. They're going to
yeah.
eat pieces away.
All right. All right. We thought that was important to go through because, it's Salesforce and it's earnings. But now we got our guest, and you probably already saw. I mean, I kind of gave the game away with when I popped, certain thing up. But it's somebody you guys already know. He's been with us. What is this, like his second or third time?
I think it's third time. I think so.
And we've known him for a long time. There's actually a picture that just came up. I think it was from 8 years ago at CRM Evolution, of a bunch of us together, and I think he might have taken that picture.
Mm-hmm.
He is
There's the man
Dr.
himself.
Michael Wu.
The man, the man, the
everyone.
myth, the legend. So,
And he's got
Michael,
the hat.
well, he can't not have the hat. Actually, that's actually at this point, he's actually made some biological advances, and that's actually his hair now.
Yeah, I think the new technology of like 3D printing has like really printed like this using hair to print, this hat in the shape of my hat. So it actually sits on top perfectly. Never have to take them off or wash them or whatever.
So I'm going to tell you, right? He has tweed hair. Right? So I was talking to somebody yesterday and telling him you were coming on the show, and Michael, he goes, "Oh, he's a genius," just like that, literally.
Yeah, that was me. Didn't I say that?
He's a genius. So you have a lot of excited people listening in on you. So you better be good today, man.
Well, that's a big shoe to fill. I hope I fill it.
I'm sure you'll manage. So, Michael, okay. So look, you are leading AI strategy at Pros. You're a scientist, data scientist, and a scientist. I mean, not just a data scientist, meaning you're a scientist of multiple disciplines in technology, I'll call it. You're an AI scientist. You're, it's interesting, actually, the position you hold, because you're a combination of a strategist and a practitioner, right? Which is and a leader of a substantial group. And that's a unusual combination. So actually, before we get into the state of AI and all those things, which we will, talk about the position a little bit, because it's not that many people who, in fact, I think you're the only person I know who holds a position like that with all those factors built in. So kind of talk about your responsibilities, how it kind of forces you to think about them, and unlike, say, a more limited scope, and what's it look like day to day from that standpoint?
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly, I think there is a technical component of working with the data scientists, and to guide them and lead them to essentially build, these machine learning AI algorithms. So that's part of it. That's more the science and research side of my work, and and then I would say, so there's a research component. There's a products component where we try to essentially infuse a product with more capability to automate, I would say repeated tasks, so people gain more efficiency out of it. And so product wise, just infuse more AI into the product. And then there's I would say that's certainly a external thought leadership component, right? So working with university, speaking externally at conferences, so that's more of a thought leadership type of role. And then finally, I think there's also a kind of internal, I would say, lens to this. I think Pros as a company, like, we also need to leverage more AI technology ourselves to make our operations more efficient and more effective. So yeah, so I think I would say, like, these four components, right? I mean, the research, the product, right, the thought leadership, and then this kind of internal transformation of leveraging um, our technology as well as other AI technology as well.
So what does that mean for like what if somebody came to you and said, how do you think about, and actually this is a question I sort of have too, which is how do you think about an AI strategy? Because on the one hand, it clearly can't be isolated from what AI is being used for, right? I mean, on the other, it doesn't stand on its own per se, which means there's other factors that have to play into it that are not, let's say, specifically AI
That's right.
driven. So
Yeah,
how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that this is actually a major, I would say, problem in the industry. I mean, there is no doubt that AI is going to be a very pervasive part of our life moving forward, whether it's in business, at work, or just in our daily life. It's going to be there. It's going to be part of it, right? I think what's preventing, I would say, a lot of the business from jumping on board is I would say, if you look at it, there's a consumer um, AI applications, right? And there's also business applications of AI, right? For consumers, it automate tasks, daily tasks, like for example, you could automate your home routines using, smart homes and all that stuff, right? I mean, if it makes a mistake, right? I mean, it's some, I would say, minor inconvenience, right? You may have to, I mean, if you ask Siri, something, it didn't understand you, you just rephrase it, right? I mean, it's a little bit of inconvenience. You lose a few minutes of time, and it's no big deal, right? So the risk and the cost of a wrong decision in the AI is small, right? But that's totally not the case in business, right? I mean, in business, when you make a wrong decision in this AI, it could be millions of dollar loss, right? And I would say a PR crisis. It could be loss of like lots and lots of customer who will never come back to you, right? And that risk is the cost of a wrong kind of decision is much higher in the business setting, right? So therefore, business has this reluctant to jump onto AI, and a lot of this reason is because, well, I mean, it's actually not the technical component of AI. It's a lot of it has to do with the non-technical component. For example, the design, the adoption, right? What if if you buy AI technology, if people don't use it because they don't trust it, because they're afraid of it, nobody's getting any benefit, right? I mean, if you have an AI but you can't explain it, so people don't trust it, then you have another issue too, right? I mean, so there's a lot of, I would say, these non-technical issues, for example, around like user experience, adoption, legal and design. So these are, I would say, issues surrounding this AI technology that need to be addressed, right, in order to move this whole industry forward in AI.
I just literally got done talking with a VP of operations for Rakuten Super Logistics, and we were talking about e-commerce and how can folks do better with understanding logistics and order fulfillment and things like that, and all this kind of quote unquote what I would call kind of boring stuff, but it's incredibly important. And from a CX perspective, a lot of that has a huge impact on the CX, the customer experience, but it's not like the sexy things that you typically think about when you think about CX and maybe how AI could be applied. But can you maybe talk about maybe how people should be looking at AI in terms of improving things like logistics, fulfillment, order stuff, because that does have, I think, a outsized and even increasingly growing impact on customer experience, even if it doesn't feel like it's the most direct thing for a customer experience.
Well, I think it does have a direct relationship to customer experience, right? Because I mean, let me ask a simple question: like, what do you think customer experience is? I mean, because I mean, to me, customer experiences can be understood in a very, very simple term, right? It's the difference between what the company deliver and then what the customer expect, right? If the customer deliver more than what the customer expect, then that's a good experience, right? It's a delighting experience, right? If the company actually deliver less than what the customer expect, right? then you have a disappointing customer, right? So it's really simple if you look at it that way, right? So I mean, I think the customer expectation is the piece that that we need to focus on, because that is a piece that actually changes very dramatically, right?
Right.
It could changes like from, I mean, because everything now, in the post-pandemic era, right, everything is moving on to digital, right? And things become more transparent. People could actually see other every other vendors online, right? So it's actually it's very easy for customers to change their experience. So if you, for example, if you see an offer to you, right, you may have a very customer experience, but the very minute that I go and see another vendor offering the same thing for, say, 10% less, right, immediately your customer experience kind of change, right? So this transparency makes customer experience really challenging, because the customer expectation can fluctuate, and so much, and get influenced by the environment. Even when you wake up in a bad day, when it's raining or something like that, you could have a worse customer experience, right? So to keep up with these kind of, I would say, ever changing, constantly changing customer expectation, right, you need something like, I would say, AI to help you online, right? I think in the traditional world, when you actually are dealing with a human, right, humans are very good at gauging customers' expectation. If I'm talking to you, seeing you face to face, your body language tell me something about what whether you are happy or not happy about what I'm offering or anything, right? But when you're talking to a machine, right, when you're online, right, when the customers are not engaged with an actual person, right, then it becomes really challenging to kind of gauge what the customer expectation is, right? So how do you do that? I mean, to do that, you need like a live stream of like a real time, I would say, this environmental contextual data, that the customer's in, what channel is coming in, which region is in, all these other contextual data about this customer. Then you will help the AI to understand the customer on the other end, right? So then they can actually respond to this customer in a way that meets his expectation, right?
So that raises an interesting 1,000 questions.
Okay.
So here's one though. So to your point of dramatically changing customer expectations. All right. So here's a stream of data that I am venting out of absolutely thin air. And it's something like this. Text, email, text, email, YouTube, text, email, YouTube, and then all of a sudden you see TikTok, and then text, email, YouTube, TikTok, TikTok. You get the point, right? The means that the customer is the things that the customer are using to
engage with you.
Essentially, they're accepting distribution is what they're doing with it, right? It's changing, and it's all of a sudden it's something different inserting itself, not much beyond its existence. Meaning you don't have a ton of data on it yet. How's AI built, or how do you build AI, or what's the thinking behind the building of the AI that says we'll handle it, right? As opposed, again, there's going to be limitations, obviously, no matter what. But what's the actual thinking behind how to handle something where it's not only dramatic, but literally all those channels you're talking about have altered in a significant way, but we don't truly have enough data on the channels themselves to understand what that means.
Yeah. So I think the key thing to recognize in this age is that even though we have big data, there's never enough data, right? We have, I mean, I think there is big data, in totality, but every time when we're dealing with a single customer or a single contact, right, the data that's available to help you make that decision dramatically reduced, right? There are lots and lots of data out there. A lot of it is actually useful in some contexts, but in this particular context, at this moment, and I'm dealing with this customer at this time, right? the relevant data that will help you, decide what to do is actually fairly small, right? So the key thing is to identify those data, right? So the second thing is that, like, when you're saying that there are these new channels where this information are coming in, right? So AI, one of the beauty of it is the ability to learn, right? So AI has a component inside that's called machine learning, right? That enable them to actually learn from data, right? So that allow it to adapt, right? When you have learning, you can adapt, right? So this is actually same thing as how a human work, right? When you see this new stream, say TikTok coming in, the example you give, right? At first you say, yeah, let's ignore it, right? But after a while, you see TikTok, 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 right? And then you say like, oh, okay, maybe I should pay attention to that, right? You learn, you see that there's more coming in more frequently, more, so it becomes more and more relevant, right? Then you should actually change your model of how this world operate. That okay, and put more weight on this particular channel than your traditional other channel that you had been paying attention to, right? So this is exactly the same way that AI would operate, right? First, you would say that you put very little weight on this new channel, right? But as it comes up more and more frequently, you will basically revise your algorithm to start to put more and more weight on this channel, right? Because if it turned out to be relevant, right? Maybe that it's a lot of very loud but very noisy, but it's actually not relevant. Then you would keep the the weighting or the impact that channel has still at a fairly low level, right? So yeah, I think it's a learning process, right? And the learning is actually enabled in this AI system through machine learning.
That's funny. I think I now realize my mind is just a piece of embedded AI because well, the reason being is my entire research methodology extends to one thing, which is I look for anomalies, and then when they show up, I look under them to see if it's just bubbles or I see if it's cement. And if it's cement, I'll go with it. If it's bubbles, I know it's just going to dissipate, which is pretty much what you just described, right?
Exactly.
So that means, unfortunately, I'm a machine.
So actually, the machine is actually programmed to mimic human. So we actually operate that way, right? I mean, we humans, operate in that sense. I mean, it's the same thing, right? If the first time you see, I don't know, say you've never seen a tiger or something, or any some animal, right? You don't know if it's dangerous or not, right? I mean, you try to engage it, and if you see more and more of it, then you start to kind of see, okay, this is dangerous, or this is not dangerous, this is attainment, right? So I think evolutionarily, our brain operates that way, right? I mean, and now we're just applying that same architecture of our brain in the business world, in analyzing, events and business trends and everything. So AI is actually built to mimic that architecture, that kind of, I would say, hierarchical kind of processing of information, right? So it is the AI that's mimicking you, Paul.
Hey, I wanted to get to this question from our buddy Anand. How much closer are we to interpreting real digital body language or posture of a customer?
So actually, gait analysis have been used, I would say, for a long time, but not in the business world. Okay, so I actually will tell you that a little story of mine. I work in the Los Alamos National Lab previously. Okay, that's actually in the time after 9/11, and basically we are actually trying to identify terrorists from a known database of kind of a headshot, of terrorists. So back then, I think the technology is not. We don't have deep learning. We don't have when a terrorist kind of wear a hat or wear sunglasses or trying to occlude themselves, right? Or they don't look at the camera, or their lighting is funny, right? Then it's very challenging for people to identify those terrorists. But it turns out that gait, the gait, the way you walk, the way for example, your stride length, how big, those are kind of fairly constant in a human.
Really?
Right? You can't fake those because it's determined by your body structure, right? You cannot actually. I mean, your bone, your muscles are growing a certain way. So your walk, the way your gait is actually, I would say, fixed by those your body structure, right? So it turns out it's actually if you can analyze the gait of a person, you can actually very uniquely identify the person.
Wow.
So that was one little side story. So so that has been used, I would say, in the, I would say, intelligence, I would say government for a long time, back in, all the way back since before this AI become popular right now, back in before 9/11, right? So around that time, right? So I don't know, like, why this hasn't been actually picked up, in the commercial space. I think I would guess that a lot of it has to involve, I would say, privacy, right? Because obviously, you tracking the person's gait, you can actually identify who's walking across the street, right? Even without looking at his face, right? Even if his face is completely covered, if you, the way you walk, right? I mean, you know who this person is, right? I mean, so this is pretty scary, right? I mean, so there's a lot of I would say, these non-technical issue that's limiting the adoption of AI, right? I mean, yeah, privacy included, right? So
Makes sense.
We'll talk a little bit about, you mentioned this, in the age of big data, there's never enough data. Um, does that rule kind of where things are going? And what impact does having, never having enough data, always in search of data, always trying to, find data and bring it all together? How is that impacting the ethical use of AI? Are we seeing any like convergence or divergence? More data, less ethics? Or is it more data, more ethics? Do they have a relationship at all? Because it seems to me like the more data we find, the more temptation it is to use this stuff in any way that was old Malcolm X, by any means necessary. But is the ethics behind AI getting any better as we get more data thrown at this?
I think there's certainly more awareness of it. I think that, right now there's, I would say, fairness, transparency, and I would say a lot of people talk about this black box issue, right? This AI, we don't know how it's making decisions and everything, right? So it is a challenge, but this is actually bringing up more and more people to kind of pay attention to this area of ethics and fairness and yeah, and accountability, right? So all these extra, I would say, big data that we're using, right? It is very tempting, right? But I think there need to be kind of a opposing force, right, to equally challenge this data scientists, right? I think there need to be these, I would say, healthy tension, right, between the two groups, right? It's not that the AI scientists should dictate everything, advancement should not drive everything. It's not everything about advancement, right? But it's not everything about regulation either, right? I mean, I think the two group need to have this kind of a healthy tension that, we raise issue that we do worry about, right? And then the scientists, if you don't raise that issue, scientists will not solve it, right? It works. Why do I address this issue, right? So if you raise that issue, then people will be, more and more scientists will be aware of it and say, okay, that's a challenging problem that I need to address, right, to make this better, right? Better for humanity, better for everyone. So that's why that healthy tension need to be there, right? And I think that right now, to answer your question, yes, they are bringing it up more and more of these. I think right now there's more question than solutions, but the pendulum will kind of swing around, right? I think this, because previously it was kind of all AI advancement, right? But so it's all pendulums on the one side, right? And now that people are aware of the power of AI, all these ethics, I'm myself almost like a half of an ethicist, right? To kind of say, hey, you can't just use AI whatever you want, right? You need to look at the ethical use of your data, right? So that you don't marginalize any group or anything. So that there's actually a lot of voices on that side now, right? And so that raises a lot of concern, right? But we don't have solution yet. But I think now more and more people are actually paying attention to address those problems, right? And so people to address, for example, the black box problem, right? This is actually a huge community called explainable AI. It's called XAI, just X and then AI. So I'm participating in that quite actively. So it's actually the attempt to explain this black box, in an ad hoc manner after the model is being trained, right? So it's not that black box cannot be explained. It's just very complex. So that even if we explain it to you, you probably cannot make sense of it to how it actually works, right? I mean, so it's like we have 10 to the 13 neurons in our brain. If I explain to you what every neuron is doing, right, you can't understand that many neurons are acting, you can't make sense of it. It can be explained, but I could show you exactly what each neuron is doing and how it actually comes to your final decision. But you're not gonna understand it. You're not gonna be happy with the answer, even if I explain that to you, right? So there are these, I would say, but the thing is that like it is explainable. It's just that we need to find a way that human can actually digest and understand it, right? And that's what the goal of these community XAI community is trying to accomplish. And there's actually lots of techniques now to explain this black box retrospectively, right? So which is actually very powerful. And there's actually other approach such as glass box approach. Instead of a black box, where you use a glass box, or the model at each stage actually are very interpretable, right? So that so there's many approach. I mean, I don't want to go into the technical detail, but there are actually many different approaches to address these issues. So the pendulum, even though it's actually a lot of focus and concerns on the ethical side, but that's good, because now the scientists will actually know what to work on, right? And then you swing the pendulum over here again, and then this will go back and forth, and this is how we progress, right? I mean, usually it's not a straight line. Usually it's some kind of zigzag, going forward. Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions actually. The first one is kind of goes to what you're talking about, and the second one kind of doesn't really. But the first one is so guy's name I constantly block it. The former CEO of MetaMind, who was acquired by Salesforce, and he was the
Scott
chief
McCorkle?
scientist. No, chief scientist of MetaMind.
Oh, MetaMind. Oh,
Yeah,
Richard Socher.
Richard Socher.
Right.
When he was
Okay.
chief scientist at Salesforce, he once made a comment because look, one of the fears that it's diminished over the last couple of years, but it's still out there, is that whole Skynet thing when it comes to AI. And it's obviously, from my standpoint, ridiculous. But at the same time, when AI, especially at the height of the hype, basically was going to take over humanity anyway. So, but he made a comment which he said very simply that I just loved. He was, look, AI doesn't want anything. That's the way he put it. AI doesn't want anything. What he meant was, ultimately, humans, you're going to have to say, AI, go over there and do that. And then they'll learn from over there and when they get there. But they're not going to say, I think I'll go over there and do that. At the biggest part of this are humans telling them what to do or where to go, how to start, where to begin. I mean, what is the task at hand, AI? And then they'll say, okay, well, we'll do that now. And we do this. Oh, we didn't do that right. We'll do this way. Oh, we got to do this now. We got to enhance that. We got to focus on that. We got to. But ultimately, they didn't say, I think I'll head over there, right? That's what he meant, right? AI doesn't want anything. So do you agree with that? Disagree with that? I just found it a fascinating way to put it.
Well, I would say that that's a simplistic way to look at it, because I think that most AI operates on, I would say, optimizing some kind of what we call objective function, right? Some kind of how you encode that objective function, right? It's a matter of how much detail you want, the AI have, right? So if you say AI doesn't want anything, I mean, I would say that's not quite true, right? Technically, because that they want to optimize the objective function, right? So if the objective function is to, I don't know, say maximize profit, right? Then it will actually do whatever the data that it has, right? Use the data that it has to recommend decisions and automations to optimize your profit, right? And some of those may involve just going over there, right? You may not know why going there will help, but you're saying that, hey, go over there, and somehow that would actually help you optimize the objective function. Right?
I think to your point, I don't think he meant basically AI isn't going to sit there and go, oh, I think I'll maximize profit. He's going to you're going to build AI to say, okay, your job is to maximize profit. Go figure it out, right? And that what he's saying is AI is not figuring out that it's supposed to maximize profit. AI is being told it's supposed to maximize profit. I think that's what he actually meant. Now,
so in that respect, right? I would say that, yeah, sure. I mean, then I would say that AI is no different than any other tool, right?
Right.
It depends on the human that's that's operating it, right? That's behind it,
Yes.
that's operating, right? You could use the AI for good, for bad, right?
Right.
It's just a tool, right?
It's
AI is
amoral.
neither inherently good or evil, right? It's actually the human intent, right? That's driving it to how you specify what do you put in that objective function, right? So I mean, a lot of things I would say. I mean, going back to the issue of I would say, for example, some of the ethical issues, right? Why is it so difficult for AI to learn ethics and morality and these things? Because it's very hard to encode that in the objective function, right? How do you encode moral and objective in the objective function? It's actually easier to make a compliant AI, right? If someone can actually encode all the laws and all the legal construct that we created, right, into this AI, right? And basically, whenever the AI produces a solution that's outside of the construct, the boundary of these legal construct, right, the cost function becomes infinite, right? Then
Mhm.
basically the AI wouldn't go out of it, right? Because you wouldn't optimizing this, you wouldn't minimize this objective function, right? So so you are basically try to stay everything within the legal confine, right? But you require someone to kind of specify all those laws in there. It's
Right.
a lot of work, but then you know legal is actually is I would say easier because it's black and white, right? If once you go out of this, it's infinite. Once you stay within the boundary, it's legal, right? Ethics and morality are much harder, right? It's not so black and white. So how do
Well,
you specify that in the objective function? That becomes very difficult, right?
well, ethics themselves are whoever's programming the AI. You got to go by their set of ethics, and not everybody's set of ethics are the same. So I know that's going to be difficult. And the other thing I think too is this, the set or the population of folks really creating the data science between and using these tools and AI. Well, more creating. It's a it's kind of close to being a homogenous group of people. It's not very varied. It's not very diverse. It's almost like, yeah, not only do you need ethical AI, you need inclusive AI in order for it to be a little bit more representative. And I
Mhm.
think that's the thing that may be missing the most is
Yeah, I think
the
that's
set of
changing now.
people that are doing it. I'm glad that I'm so glad that you hear you
Yeah.
say it. It's changing because we there was that great Netflix on when we talked about the facial recognition and the AI couldn't detect a black woman from like something else. And part of that reasoning was because the folks who were creating the AI didn't look like the black woman it was trying to detect. And so that's been one of those things that's been a missing ingredient to this.
Yes.
Not to say that that's purely the reason why ethical AI is so hard to do, but when you don't have certain folks or certain pieces represented in the creation of the technology, you're automatically going to be losing something that may be very important to its
Yes.
being as successful as it should be.
Totally. I think that's actually one of the I would say the big conundrum, right? In AI is that the data that you use to train the machine, right, comes from you actually don't have the entire world's data, right? You use a sample of data, right? So that sample of data is selected in I would say even though you think it's random, sometimes there may be some biases in there, right? And the inherent biases in those data that you select to use to train the AI, right, will bias how your AI behave, right? And when you actually try to, okay, if you actually use this AI in the context of where that data was sampled from, only those data, only the population where you sample the data from, there's no problem. The problem is that we often, very, very often, right, use this AI, overgeneralize it to a much bigger population, right? And that's when you have problem with not including these other perspective, right? So ethical, hey, you may be ethical to you, but not ethical to me, right? I mean, so we should need to look at these different perspective as well, right? So that's where the inclusiveness is actually very important. So I think right now, more and more company are actually including many more of these, I would say, social science discipline, psychology, behavioral economists, right, social scientists, right, into these kind of discussion of the design of these AI system, right? So then, which is good. I think this is actually a very good and very healthy kind of include. Like I said, AI is it's the technical aspect of it is one component, but there's actually a lot of a huge, I would say, area of that involved the non-technical component AI that's actually equally important, right, to drive acceptance and adoption in the society.
Whew. This has been a great conversation, and the only thing that may rival the conversation that we had, check out the comments, man. It's been a fascinating conversation / debate, going on, and it's so much so that I could really pop it all up. But Michael, it's always a pleasure to have you join us, and as you can see, you spark a lot of thought, a lot of discussion, and I think that's good because this whole area, it needs to have more people involved in the creation and in the usage and in the development, just generally speaking. So thanks
Sure.
for
I mean,
joining us.
Needs you around. Needs you around.
Yeah.
All right, I'm happy to be here at any time. If I don't get to answer a lot of this question, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. I'm try to do
No,
my best to answer it.
we'll bring you on routinely. That's all.
Absolutely.
Simple enough.
Okay. I love to.
Yeah,
I love to be on here. Yeah.
We can make those decisions, Michael.
That's right. Well, actually, I downloaded this app that has this really good AI. Right?
Excellent.
So we can work
To
on
help
that.
you
We'll
select
use that.
speakers or
But
guests.
I have to scan your two faces.
Look at this. Look at these. Look at these kudos. And that's a fellow PhD. So there you go. You're getting it from your people. Yeah. I almost want to say to the folks in the comment, you guys had a great show too, because I couldn't even pop all that stuff up. I mean, it was deep.
They were rolling.
They were
Of
really
course,
rolling.
by the way, Esteban was, of course, right in the dead center of it.
Of course, where the tagline, bringing CRM to its knees since whatever that's 2008.
That's right. The four horsemen.
The four horsemen.
Tagline: bringing CRM to its knees since 2001. Bringing CRM to its knees.
Awesome. Hey, Michael, thanks again for joining us, and I hope
It's a pleasure.
You stay safe,
awesome.
and we look forward to talking with you sooner rather than later.
We'll
Glad to
talk
be
you
here.
soon, my friend. So
Thank you.
And
awesome.
I got one more thing I got to do before we can close.
All right.
Where is it? Oh, there it is.
No, you
Now-
didn't. You didn't know.
Oh!
2 more things. Back out.
All right.
Back out
Let
of
me-
that picture, man. All right.
On behalf of Dr. Michael Wu, I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
We are the CRM players, and now we can go to this.
That's right.
See you next week.